think that's very ambitious to do a full edit in just a day.
Yeah, it's dumb.
Of 4 people.
I blame Jaren.
I blame myself as well.
Good, we're on the same page. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Anything Joe's, a collaborative journey through the world of G.I. Joe. My name is Greg Engel.
And I'm Jaren Decker.
And we'll be your host today. Today on Anything Joe's, we have 2 very special guests that have joined us in the studio. Our first special guest ever, it's Jason and Joel from Order of Battle. Why are you guys both laughing? This is why we don't use cameras.
I gotta say, you really switched on the professional broadcaster voice at the drop of a hat. That was very impressive.
No more casual, Greg. It's time for professional, Greg. Guys, thanks for coming on the show. We've never done an interview before, so it should be extremely professional, and there will probably be no issues whatsoever with it.
100% professional questions.
So we don't really have a itinerary, so we're just going to kind of go with the flow, and I'm going to talk to you guys about your collection a little bit, and we'll just see where it takes us. So where do we begin? Let's talk a little bit about how you guys collect, because the 2 of you collect Joes in kind of radically different ways from one another, which I think is good because you get to see 2 sides of the coin, essentially. As the only dude here that really aggressively collects both vintage and modern, I think it's interesting to hear what appeals to each one of you individually. Do you guys both know off the top of your head what the very first figure you got was?
Not even a little bit.
You don't know what your first figure?
No.
I can't remember the first figure I got. I remember one of the first figures I loved was actually a core figure. I can tell you, when I started buying my own Joes a little bit, probably later than I should have been, it was a Spy Troops Dusty that came with some sort of weird Cobra Trooper that had like clip-on gear, and he came with this like ghillie suit, but I just essentially put the ghillie suit on Dusty, and he was just like my guy. But that was in the first batch, because they were cheap, and I used whatever pocket money I had. I bought a few, but I remember that was in the first batch because of the ghillie suit.
Have you seen the Spy Troops movie around that time?
The only media I had tied into it was when I kept collecting, they gave those computer DVDs. And I remember, like, they did not work very well. I don't know if it was my parents' desktop computer wasn't that great, or the discs weren't that great, or a combination of both. But, like, I was obsessed with hunting those down and trying to get that media.
Yeah, I think I have one of these in my collection. If I remember it correctly, it's sort of like it was like a motion comic, right?
I wish I could tell you. I don't I don't remember.
I'm looking at this Dusty now, and I guess the disc says 2 cartoon episodes, a PC game, and a digital comic book. But I can't remember if the digital comic book was an original thing or something that they just like scanned in. But you're right, it was pretty rough even at this time. I don't remember what 2. I don't know if that's the original cartoon episodes.
I'm pretty sure it's in the weird. It's like Spy Troops era animation. It's like weird 3D sort of like it's not Sunbow or anything. It's from that media time.
Have you seen the Spy Troops movie since then?
I have about 8 copies of it, and not a single one will play all the way through. And I bought 3 of them sealed.
It's almost like it's trying to do you a favor.
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you from the bits that I've seen and skipped and whatever. I mean, the movie is, not good.
Yeah, it's rough. Spy Troops, I don't remember very well, but the Valor versus Venom movie, I feel like I know pretty significant details about. I don't know why it's more memorable.
Because it's awful.
Maybe because it has Dr. Link Talbot in it, baby. The man, the myth, the legend. Okay, sorry, I went on a little detour there just because Spy Troops the movie is fascinating to me because it came out at such an odd time. All right, so what about first figure aside? What's your favorite figure?
I know a lot of the figures I had as a kid, or I have a general idea of who I had as a kid. I just can't remember my first, and I don't collect out of pure nostalgia, so that's never been an issue. But one of my favorite characters has been Roadblock since I was a kid, and he is my current only real focus figure in terms of buying mock or getting the complete run of Roadblocks.
How many roadblocks are there?
Roadblock was one of the three most versioned figures in 82 to 94 A-Raw. It was Snake Eyes, and then Cobra Commander and Roadblock were the same. So you're talking about version 1, and then 86, Tiger Force, Recalled, re-release, Battle Corps, and then 2 Star Brigades. And of course the 94 Star Brigade also had the grenade variant. So
Keep going. Tell me about Roadblock version 8. Let's see. Can you list them all?
I just did.
No. Oh, that's right. I forgot. That's not okay. So that's not fair. So you've made it known that you don't collect modern figures at all.
I quit buying modern when A just wouldn't play with them. We would crack one open. He would play with it for a day, maybe 2, and it'd get tossed in a box. And he would go back to vintage. And so just trying to balance money, if we're both collecting vintage, that's an easier purchase than trying to do the whole run. You know, ultimately, whenever I first started doing this, I was willing to go 82, all the way to, at that point, current.
So you only define vintage as the stuff that came out in the original run. And the clarification on that being, like, if you look at these roadblocks, which I am now, there are, I don't know what you classify them as other than, now I kind of call it Joel's era. But from like 2002 to like 2007, there's some in-betweens. Like they made O-ring figures, so it's not...
The new sculpt era.
We've always classified, and we being A and I, 82 to 94 is A-Raw. 97 to 2006, we always call the middle years, because there's Valor versus Venom, there's Spy Troops, there's Built to Rule, there's whatever. So that's just the middle years. And then 2006 to current is the modern era, is what we call them. I know there's a lot of variations between 25th and 30th and etc. To us, it's just the modern era and the middle years. Our focus is the A-Raw years. We will dip our toes beyond that, but not in any grand scheme. If it comes across us, sure. But the focus kind of ends at 94 at the moment. Maybe at some point we'll move beyond that.
I want to ask you a question that I asked A earlier that he didn't have a clear answer to. So your collecting style, as you've laid out, is you are kind of working on 2 vintage collections simultaneously.
Kind of.
You're looking for a collection that's complete and it's like a display collection, more or less, like your actual quote-unquote collection. And then you have a separate set, same stuff, but for playability. Is that a fairly accurate representation?
When A dropped Transformers and was like, I don't want Transformers anymore. I've never cared about Lego. Please quit buying it for me. Let's just focus on G.I. Joe. That's when I started getting heavy into making sure that we had a lot of playable items. And he was very quickly like, I want all of 83. I want all of 84. I want all of 85. And the money follows the interest. So I wasn't overly playing, So most of the stuff that I was looking at was kind of display worthy. But we started doing play worthy too. We don't have a his or my collection. The whole collection is ours. Some of it's display only. Some of it's play. Some of it kind of blurs the line. Now, that's wildly ambitious and expensive, and there's certain points of that where that falls apart. We don't need 6, or I guess 5, Steel Brigades for play. He has a Steel Brigade D. We don't need 2 playworthy Stardusters. He has a beater Starduster to play with. Everything else will be display. He doesn't play with 82 at all, so all of our 82 is just strictly display. But I'm not necessarily chasing 2 full sets. That is psychotically ambitious, at least at this point, right? Like if I had continued buying in the early 90s or in 2000 when I first got back into collecting toys again and had to stop, maybe that would be feasible. But now it's a little heavy. So we're 80% done with the line with a lot of duplicates and crossover between play and display. Where we'll go from here is just where, what pops up, what's of interest, what keeps his interest. We keep also having tangents of Mask, 6-inch Star Wars Black Series, Sky Commanders,
So you said that you guys don't play with 82 at all. Is that a decision for preservation's sake, where you're just like, there are no beaters of these figures, stay away?
Well, my 82 line is pretty clean. I had 3 versions of 82. I kept the best version. I sold off the other 2. And they re-released all of 82 in 83 with swivel arm, which we have, a nice display 83 set and a play 83 set. So there's no point in playing with the 82.
Okay, so this brings me back to my source question. When and there'll be a bit later where I talk to A, where it's just me and him. But my question for him was, you've got 2 sets that you're working on simultaneously. And how many figures do you have in that set that are complete display figures that you don't have a play figure of? And A, to his credit, knows, the ins and outs of your all's personal collection. Above and beyond. He started talking about variants, and I was like, buddy, I'm gonna have to get a guide or something out because I can't keep up with what you're talking about right now. So my question for him was, and he rattled off a couple of figures that you guys have in your display collection that you don't have a play figure of, and the one, I don't know why he picked this one specifically, but he was like Heat Viper V2, the green and black one. So I was like, okay, so let's say you come up with a story and it requires a Heat Viper V2. If you go to your dad and go, hey, I gotta use a Heat Viper V2, but we don't have a play one. Can I use this one? What's your response to that?
Well, it's a Heat Viper V2, so I would be real surprised if we had a display one at all. So I'm going to have to take him at his word for it. Also, it's a Heat Viper V2. He can have it. It's fine. At the same token, if he said, can I play with the Gold Head Steel Brigade, I'm reluctant because of the cost of it, but I'm also not a hard no because I know how he takes care of his figures.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? We have a Mickey Mouse Cobra Commander because that was something he wanted when he was 6, and I made a very in my favor trade, got one, and handed it to him, and he did the, as all 6-year-olds do, the false feint 3 times, and then he went and put it on the shelf. So it's never been off limits to him. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And he's played with our Star Blazers or Space Battleship Yamato bridge multiple times. That's from 1978. I'm not going to be able to replace that easily if that ever breaks. He's good with these things. He's fine.
I'll chime in because we had like this fun project that we did back and forth where I was completing the modern clubs, foreign Sky Patrol guys, and it actually kind of tied in with Jason buying the vintage because he wanted to pair, I believe it was actually A's idea, he wanted to pair the Flying Scorpion with the SDCC exclusive, like, Cobra-fied Sky Striker. And, I don't know a lot about vintage stuff other than if it's foreign, it's certainly expensive. And him and I spent, I'm not kidding, hours talking about hunting these figures down because neither are easy. My side was significantly easier than his, but specifically with Flying Scorpion, it was goofy because my wife bought it for me for my birthday and she accidentally threw the file card away.
Oh.
Full disclosure, the guy who packed it in a weird way, and he stashed the file card in between packing material and the box.
Mm.
It was kind of blended in with what should have been thrown away, but when he got his Flying Scorpion, I was on the phone with him, and A came in, and he was really excited, and he's like, all right. And I didn't see it, but I could hear him, almost coddle it like a baby and set it inside of the Sky Striker, close the canopy. He was like, now, this is a special figure because it's definitely a display figure, but he's flying the Sky Striker, so it's kind of like safe play. And then I literally hear him run off in the background flying the Sky Striker. So
Yeah.
It's his knowledge and his, let's face it, the kid plays with mass toys, which are famously finicky.
Well, I had this idea that it would be cool to get all 9 domestic release Sky Strikers between version 1 all the way through the club stuff and the SDC stuff. And I also have the Fun School, so we have 10. I'm still chasing some of the foreigns, but the prices have gotten a bit out of control, and I don't want to pay $700 and crack open a minty fresh Takara. So as we were completing those Sky Strikers, he and I were on a walk, and we were talking about who would be the different pilots for such. And so we got the 98, I think, the black uniform ace to go with the boomer, and then the other aces to go with a couple others. And we had a couple vehicles left, and we were just talking about it, and he was the one that said, who would pair well with the Scythe and Starscream would be the Brazilian Sky Patrol Black Scorpion, and I don't even remember his name anymore. The other one.
The Vulture, Black Vulture. It's Flying Scorpion and Black Vulture.
Yes, thank you. And we don't do modern, so I went, are you talking about Brazilian figures? And he was like, yeah, on Yojo Brazil. And so we have all 4 of the Brazilian Sky Patrol, and they are in his bedroom, 2 foot from where he sleeps, standing next to the Sky Strikers. We do have 1 extra of the Aguia Commando, which is the blue and silver one. But the others, I mean, he plays with them. So, yes, to your question, display is meant to be just display, but this is the beast I've created.
It's the suggestion, not the rule.
Right.
Certainly, if someone in my family came up and went, hey, I'd like to get a Black Scorpion or Flying Scorpion, the original vintage, I'd be like, well, I want you to go to college also, so prioritize appropriately. I thought I blocked Yojo Brazil from you for our internet.
I got some great help to get those. It wasn't,
Black market dealings, I understand.
Sure. I sold plasma.
Let me piggyback off that for a second, Jaren, because when we were talking earlier about how devil may care you are about stuff that you buy and then filming outdoors with it, is your mentality on it, I bought it and I'm going to play with it, or are you just so new at this you don't realize that you're basically ripping your money in half every time you put them in the mud?
No, I make a very conscious effort to not buy anything on card because I'm going to rip it open. Like if it's, like I have this Chuckles and he will never be removed from the card. That's why I have this Chuckles, so that if I want to play with the Chuckles, I have it. I will never buy, that'll be the only on-card actual G.I. Joe that I probably ever have. But no, I mean, to me it is, I bought it and I'm going to play with it. Like it is a toy, and the way I see it is I missed a lot of time with it that a lot of other people had. I don't have those memories as a child playing with it, so I'm going to make those memories now. So,
do you teach your kids how to play with vintage toys? Do you do the like this is something that I started with A when he was like 3.5 years old, was the vigorous but not destructive play.
No, I haven't started any of that, man. They don't touch my Joes. I have Joes for them. And then like if he came down and he saw one that I have that's in okay shape, I'm gonna let him play with it. But if he comes down and is like, hey, I want to play with Cobra Commander, I'm like, no, not yet. You're gonna have to learn, because I do take it outside, but I am still careful with it.
We all want things, young man, and it's good that you learn disappointment early in your life.
Even though I am playing with those in the mud or taking pictures, I'm still very careful when I'm doing it. I'm getting more dirty than the figure is. I'll be down on my hands and knees, trying to make sure it doesn't fall over and making sure that, and then clean it after I get it out. I'm trying not to ruin them because I would like them to last, because I don't have to pay for these things again, because I can't imagine they're getting any cheaper.
Kind of captured my mentality perfectly, and it's like, you bought the figure, so honestly, do whatever you want with it. Honestly, if you wanted to strap, a pack of firecrackers to an 83 Snake Eyes, hey, it's your money, it's your decision. You bought the figure. Do whatever you want with it. It's nobody's business. So
I might have some limits there.
No, I'm not saying I would do that. I'm not suggesting to do that.
Come on, Cobra Commander, let's go.
I'm just saying, as an extreme example, obviously. But
no, yeah.
I think people get a little too, especially in collecting. I mean, because obviously, if you're into collecting, the price range of most things. But I think people get a little too hung up on what other people do with their collections. And I'm not saying that in reflection to the question you asked. I'm just saying, in general, I see a lot of stuff online that's just like, well, worry about it if it's in your collection. Don't worry about it if it's in somebody else's collection. Like it's none of your business what anybody else does with their property.
If you didn't want my Cobra Commander to be in the mud, you should have bought it before I did.
Precisely.
Because it's going in the mud.
I placed a bid on it, Jaren. I can't help it that I was working when it ended. This actually, this is something that I kind of face off with a lot, is that if I buy something that's a high priced item, like my FSS set is a perfect example, it really is like very difficult for me to open that stuff up, because even though I don't, in my mind I'm like, I probably will never ever resell this, that the value is held in that the condition of that packaging, and so every time I get something like that, it almost is like a disappointment because I'll get it and then go, I'm probably never going to be able to convince myself to open this. Because there's a certain price point where things get a little wiggly for me, where I'm like, I don't know if I can do that. That's why I try to buy a lot of stuff open when I can, because then all the like guesswork is done for me.
When I was doing the modern, I jumped into FSS. I think, Joel, we talked about it. It was 5 that I jumped into.
I believe it was 5.
Yeah.
Because I was hoping you had 4 and were going to sell some to me, but you're not selling any to me, and I believe you started with 5.
The point was that, so I started with 5, and we would open them, and he would play with them for like a day, and then they'd go in a box. And I have all the equipment bagged and named, just in case at some point he either wants to play with it or I decide to get rid of it. By FSS 7, half of that line he didn't even open. So I still have those sealed.
Not even open to the point where they're in the 2-pack mailer box.
No, they're not in the mailer box anymore because I used those mailer boxes for other things. But, I still have, half of FSS 7 sealed just simply because he never opened it. He really couldn't care at all. Like, it's not even like put away. He sees it every day and he just chooses not to engage at all. So our disconcern of modern has nothing to do with me, other than my wallet is happy that he doesn't like it.
You better hold on to that wallet. I'm gonna get him on the modern train at some point. There's just so many great characters he's missing out on.
I don't think you're wrong. And in fact, he didn't care at all about Star Wars until 3 months ago. And I took him to every Star Wars movie because I didn't want him to be an adult and be like, why didn't you take me to that? And so now he plays with some Star Wars 6-inch Black Series. But even our 4-inch Black Series Star Wars figures are in the same box with all the modern Joes. Just doesn't care. I don't know why.
I can hook him up with a guy that needs to get rid of his Star Wars stuff real on the cheap. He only collects Power of the Force carded figures like an insane person.
Got a couple. I don't know if the camera can pick them up. There's a few back there.
No, they can't. Sorry, bud.
The camera.
Got the rest of them.
I've got an anti-Star Wars filter on all cameras installed through this network.
Yeah. So for whatever he's into, the money follows him, and that's fine with me.
Let's take a quick break here, and I'm going to jump over and talk to A for just a couple of minutes. All right. A, welcome to the show. Thanks so much for joining us here. Well, I say us, but it's really just me and you, isn't it? Finally, you're out underneath the corporate umbrella of your father, and you don't have to worry about him censoring you and editing all your speech. So, you got a bunch of stuff for your birthday, right? Recently?
Yeah.
What did you get again? The Sky
Commanders.
Sky Commanders. So, what's your thought process on those? Are you still playing with them a lot?
I would be an idiot if I wasn't.
I am not familiar with Sky Commanders at all. I looked at the cartoon and I kind of looked at the figures to get a feel for it, and I saw that you had them like they string around a lot, right? That's kind of their gimmick, is they got zip lines that go back and forth. Pretty cool. I can imagine that is a toy that over the years is hard to keep in good shape because of that. Like people just stringing them across their living room all the time.
I don't know.
I don't know. I've never seen one, so but I thought they looked really cool.
I have a bunch of them. They're really cool.
Do you guys have a whole set of those already?
We have all the Cardi guys, all the bad guys, which there's only 4 bad guys, which makes absolutely no sense since there's like 20 other good guys.
Maybe they're just really efficient. They're really, really good at what they do.
I've actually seen the cartoon. They just get beat up.
I want to watch the cartoon. I think I'll probably put it on my list of things to watch. I want to talk to you about your all's G.I. Joe collection a little bit. You guys have always been collecting vintage figures. Is that right? You don't have any modern stuff at all?
I actually do a little, but not much.
What is it about the vintage line specifically that's like so appealing to you as compared to like the modern figures? Because the modern figures I feel like are a little bit more they have better detail. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but I don't know. I just don't play with modern. I play with 6-inch. I play with 3 3/4, but I just don't play with 4-inch. I don't know why.
Do you remember what maybe not your earliest memory, but do you remember when you first started playing with G.I. Joes?
Yep.
What was it about them at that time that was so interesting? Obviously, your dad's got a big stake in them, and I get that that's a big pull because when I was a kid, my brother, who was like 7 years older than me, he kind of decided what I was into because I looked up to him. So if he played with G.I. Joe, so I like G.I. Joes. He liked wrestling figures. I liked wrestling figures. Was it kind of like that?
No, it was more like he showed me to see if I would play with it.
Yeah, is kind of my hope for my kid as she gets older, is that she'll be into them, and that's something that we can kind of share together. But you're kind of an uncommon trend because we don't get to see a lot of kids that are getting into G.I. Joe for the first time. Closest thing I've seen to a kid getting into G.I. Joe is Jaren. So I think it's interesting to talk to somebody that's young, that's into it, because it doesn't click with a younger audience as like it used to when I was a kid. Do you have a favorite G.I. Joe character?
It's easily Sergeant Slaughter.
Somehow I'm not surprised by that. I saw a thing in the news this week where Sarge was talking about how when he was first getting signed on to be in G.I. Joe, there was like a big conflict with the WW. It was called the WWF back then, and
Yeah.
they didn't want to let him out of it. He was like, "We just signed a deal with LJN, and they're going to make wrestling figures. You can't go to Hasbro and do this." And the Sarge was like, "Well, I'm going to do it, or I'm going to quit wrestling," which is a crazy thing because at that time wrestling was like the biggest thing. So walking away from a fairly lucrative career just so you could be a G.I. Joe is pretty wild. But I thought that was a cool story.
Yeah, he told that story at Joe Fest at the Slaughter Breakfast.
I think that's real cool. I love the Sarge. When I was a kid and they used to show the cartoon, there was a certain era where Sarge would be at the front of every episode and we'd kind of talk about it. And then they started integrating him into the commercials as well. So he really became like a super familiar face. I remember I didn't own a Triple T as a kid, but they did have a mail-away Sarge that I had and played with him like crazy. I used to have a friend who would always compare the size of the bicep of every G.I. Joe. And the figure that had the largest bicep, in his mind, was like, well, he's the strongest because he's got the biggest bicep. And so it's because of this guy that I remember specifically that Sarge's biceps are huge compared to other vintage figures of that time. It's a weird fact, but Big Boa is the other character. Big Boa is the other character who has huge arms. Maybe it's just because they're both bare arms. They made them like that. But
And Road Pig.
Oh, yeah, Road Pig does. Another guy with no shirt. There must be something to that. Do you have a memory? Do you have like a favorite Sarge memory? Like not necessarily a real life memory, because I met him as well, and I'm sure that just like when you did, it was a huge deal. But when I think about like great Sarge moments, I think about that like his very first appearance where he fights all those bats and he's like throws them all off. I think that's a pretty great.
Yeah, that was pretty cool.
And the part where he fights Nemesis Enforcer is also another good kind of iconic moment for Sarge. It kind of sucks because Sarge came in right at the end of the really good cartoons, so he was in like the later seasons that are
the Deke.
Yeah, have you watched a lot of those?
If you're listening to this, please don't hate me forever, but I like Deke more than Sunbow.
Tim Finn from Talkie Joe is also a very outspoken fan of the Deke era cartoon.
Thank you.
I mean, I have no issues with it. I think the Deke era stuff is very funny, sometimes unintentionally. And I remember when it used to air at just the worst time. I think I would wake up to go to school and it would be airing at like 5:30 in the morning or something. Like it was just it had the worst like block to air. So I never got to see a lot of them when they were actually on TV. I saw a couple of them. And then they put out that VHS tape with Rapid Fire, which was the Revenge of the Pharaohs episode, which is the one where they're doing something with the Egyptian thing and the big helmet gets knocked off and hits a night creeper. He thinks he's a pharaoh. He captures Lady J. Anyway, I watched that episode tons of times because that was one of the only episodes I actually had on tape. It wasn't until way, way later, like maybe when the DVDs came out, that I was actually able to see the entirety of the series.
Yeah, I remember that episode.
It's a good episode. Maybe because I've seen it so much. But I love that pack. And Rapid Fire, a figure that gets no respect across the board, is a figure that I love tremendously.
Yeah, he's just a repainted Super Trooper. That guy in Super Trooper's awesome.
Oh, Super Trooper is awesome. It's another figure that I love.
Because he's got big biceps.
I used to love that vest, and I don't remember if it was supposed to or not, but at some point, I think the glue weakened, and that you could pull that chest apart on both of those guys.
On my Super Trooper, which is actually out right now, I can take the front chest plate off.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love both of those guys. Okay, so Sarge is your favorite Joe. Who's your favorite Cobra?
I don't know.
You don't have a favorite?
No, in Terror Slaughter. Definitely in Terror Slaughter. He's a custom figure.
That's the left. I've seen that. Well, it's good to keep it all Sergeant Slaughter focused.
Yeah, I actually my favorite Sergeant Slaughter is the mail away one. I also have a sealed one, and I have both variations.
Is that the USA one?
Yeah,
That's the one that I had as well as a kid. That I used to love.
there's a variation in the USA. Thick or thin? Thick or thin?
Thick or thin what?
USA.
Oh, I see the lettering. Okay. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
There are not a lot of variations that I actively, because there's so many, it's hard to narrow your focus on what you want. I got the Zorana that has the earrings because I think that's a cool variation. And I have the Lifeline that doesn't have the gun, the one that was in the cereal box. I think that's a cool variation. After that, it gets a little iffy.
Yeah, but the reason we can't find the leg variant because it's not a variant. It's a pre-production.
Oh, that's a whole other can of worms.
Yeah.
Okay, so we got your favorite Joe and Cobra combined. What's your favorite vehicle?
If you know me, you probably know it's the Hammer.
The Hammer is a good choice and an unusual choice. Great vehicle. Good. It's got like a good paint scheme. It's got a lot of cool accessibility. It's not too outlandish. It's like grounded a lot in reality. I like that a lot. It's kind of like a supersized vamp, sort of.
Yeah.
Better than the old Badger, that's for sure.
Take that, Jaren.
I actually got a Badger within the last week and a half. I've never had one before, but I got it in a deal. This dude was selling like 2 vehicles that I wanted, and he had this, so I picked it up. And I have to say, having it in hand, it's not a bad vehicle at all. It's actually pretty cool.
Yeah, I actually bought one at Joe Fest.
Yeah, I wish the paint scheme was a little different, but otherwise, I think it's pretty cool.
But still, the Hammer's way better.
So the Hammer's your favorite vehicle. What's your favorite playset?
Maybe Ford America, but that's also a vehicle, and that ours kind of sucks. Totally sucks.
I picked up a Ford America Kentuckiana, and that's another first for me. And I was blown away by how it's so very unusual. I watched the commercial for it because I didn't understand what it was supposed to look like.
We usually have 2 of them because one of them totally sucks.
Yeah, it's like all busted or incomplete.
Well, it doesn't have the missiles and stuff, and it can't raise and stuff. You have to like turn it a little so it'll stay up when it's raised because we don't have a rubber band. It disintegrated.
I've got a lot of stuff like that, or it doesn't. It doesn't. None of my his tank turrets work, and
How? Every single his tank turret I own works.
really, that's uncommon. When I was shopping for them, they were all priced with like broken turret, and I watched a bunch of like tutorials on getting them repaired, and I guess there are easy fixes for it. Like you could just wrap tape around it and it makes it tighter or something. I'm kind of getting into that, the like repair part of it. We're trying to fix.
You never even had to repair stuff.
So Ford America, potentially favorite playset / other vehicle. Tell me something. Actually, what's the one thing you guys have in your collection that's like your favorite thing? It can be a figure, a vehicle, anything.
Sergeant Slaughter. My sealed V1 US Thin USA Sergeant Slaughter.
Are you normally into variants, or is it only because it's Sarge that you're really into it?
Well, if we find a variant, we'll probably get it.
Yeah.
But we're not like actively chasing every single variant.
Do you have an awareness of what you guys are missing, or do you just let your dad kind of do all the legwork on that checklist?
I know a lot of what we're missing.
Yeah.
Dad did something with our sealed, carded, exclusive. I think it was Toys R Us. I might not be right. Maybe it was Target
Mm-hmm.
or Walmart or something. But it was a hit and run exclusive that came with a parachute, and it was carded. And that was apparently the only gear, except for the foreign Tiger Force one, equipment that we have. So now we need a whole new set of equipment because I think Dad sold that or something. I don't know.
It's interesting to me how in depth with that stuff that you get. Your knowledge base for stuff like that already exceeds what I would not know. If I was looking right at it, I wouldn't know. I only know like basic stuff like what hit run looks like, what his file card says, what he normally comes with, and that's about as much as my brain can handle.
If you can get 2 cards, you can tell if one's the exclusive and one's not, because the bubble would be bigger.
All right, to hold the parachute.
Yeah, and it'll say like Toys R Us on it or something.
Yeah, it doesn't matter if I see one carded, I automatically know I can't afford it. So.
Hey, it's only like $100.
Yeah, sure, only $100.
That's so cheap.
So cheap.
I made that in like 2 weeks for doing chores.
You might have better income than I do. Maybe I'll come work for you. You can
No,
pay.
seriously.
You pay me half of that. I'll do your work. You get cut in on the profits.
I only have $7 right now. I spent that all on a mask rhino.
I'll take $3.50.
I don't even have $10.
Join the club, buddy. We're all very poor here.
And I only get 25 cents a tour.
Oh, that's a racket right
At
there.
least it was in the fall where I can rake, which gets me like $2.
I don't get any money. I have to do chores, and my wife doesn't pay me anything, which I think is bogus. Maybe I'll let you talk to her and see if you can convince her.
Give Greg money.
That's what I'm talking about. What's on your want list? Is there something that you're like, this is the next thing I want?
There was some vehicle that was never made. That was like, oh, I remember a Renegade's Major Blood car.
A Renegade's Major Blood car. Is that like the sports car?
Yeah, it's like a sports car with missiles,
Yeah.
a machine gun, which has a grenade launcher in the center of it.
You could get like a custom made of it, maybe.
Yeah, but it was never released.
Was it in development, or are they like planning on releasing it?
I don't know.
It's just something you saw that you want.
Yeah.
I feel that way about that Cobra chopper that everybody loves, the one that's like a big transport.
Yeah.
I've wanted one of those forever.
Yeah, people make customs.
Yeah, and I've seen people make customs of that specific helicopter because it's so popular. I've never bought a custom vehicle before. I don't really know what how expensive is it going to be, or do I have to get the parts myself? Blah, 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 blah. Jaren got a custom vamp made that was pretty cool. It was kind of simple, but it was when he first got started. It has like a Stinger rocket launcher on the back, but it's the military green like the original vamp. And it has like a spare tire right on the front. It's pretty cool for a minimal amount of work. Do you have have you created a lot of characters for your G.I. Joe universe? You make like a lot of, I remember when your dad was organizing his stuff, you guys had a bunch of like scrap irons and you'd made like a scrap iron army. Does that sound right?
Yeah, but both of my super Iron Vipers.
Do you make a lot of characters in squads like that? Or do you typically just kind of work with what is already in the universe?
Look at my custom bin.
Is that like your stuff to be made or stuff that's already made?
Custom figures that I've already made.
Yeah. I have a lot of stuff like that too. Looking around just near my desk, I've got a lot of customs.
You know those Atari cases for G.I. Joe?
Mm-hmm.
I have one completely crammed, no trays, like almost overflowing. The top is bending up. Like, this is the bottom, and, like, this is the top, but here's the top of the case.
Uh-huh.
This is the actual ground level,
Uh-huh.
but this is the top of the case. It's literally stuffed to its maximum. I have that many custom figures that I made from body parts.
How much do you like give them a code name? You give them a backstory? You put them into the universe?
Yeah.
Yeah, I do. I like to mess around with a lot of that as well. I'm not as good as painting as I used to be, so I try to not paint a whole lot if I don't have to.
I don't even paint these guys.
Yeah, that's kind of how I am. Plus, if you don't put any paint on them, they're a lot more playable, and I like that.
Yeah, and plus, one of my custom figures has a paint error head
Oh.
of a figure we don't even have. A 93 paint error Duke head where they didn't paint his face.
Do you guys think you'll ever finish your collection? Do you think you'll ever, or do you think you'll just always be trying to get the next thing?
I honestly have no idea. If we had one of everything, we probably would be pretty close, but...
Yeah, I know you guys collect kind of maybe not multiples, but I know he has a goal of a set to play with and a goal to kind of keep preserved.
I literally have 6 V1 Heat Vipers, and we only own 1 V2 Heat Viper, and it's in display.
Oh, do you guys have a lot of stuff that's not for play, like stuff that you only have the one of? Or if you were like, I got a crucial mission going on, I need a Heat Viper V2, would he be like, yeah, all right, you can play with it just this once?
I don't know. I honestly haven't asked.
Turn around and ask him right now. Ask him if you can play with the one Heat Viper V2 that you have.
Hey, Dad, if I had a crucial mission where I need a Heat Viper V2, could I play with their display one?
I don't know what we're talking about.
Craig heard you. It's Greg's fault I asked.
I think I'm gonna say that's a no. I'm gonna say if you've only got one, you don't have a play one with, you're not allowed to mess with it. Do you guys have a lot of figures like that you're like not?
We only have like 3 or 4.
That's pretty good in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah, there's V2 Night Creeper Leader. There's V2 Heat Viper. There's the green mail away V2 mold Deep 6.
Yeah, I've got one of those.
So technically Deep 6 V4. And like maybe one other.
I'm really impressed, with your overall knowledge of like G.I. Joe stuff. A lot of people don't know off the top of their head like this version or this mail away. I mean, variants excluded. It's interesting to see how much you've learned about the craft in general, like the hobby.
I'm better at like specific figures, not like their equipment, but like the figure itself up to 90. Which no one hate me, but my favorite year is 90.
I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I do think it starts to go downhill a little bit from there.
A lot of the cooler figures are in the 90s.
I was collecting right up until the Star Brigade stuff started. I was buying DEF when it came out, and I have tons of Eco Warrior stuff that I love. I just repaired a Toxo Lab this week.
Cool.
So I collected almost right up until the end of the line. I collected I got in just a little after it started, and I quit just before they did, basically.
This is a pretty good timeline.
It helped that I bought all that stuff when it was coming out, and then I really didn't get rid of a lot of that stuff. So a lot of the stuff that's in my collection now is the stuff that I bought as a kid. It only had one owner, me. It also means that a lot of those figures are incomplete because I lost tons of stuff when I played with them as a kid.
My Tomax and Zama are the ones that my dad played with as a kid.
I think those are some of the best figures, honestly. The ones that you've had your whole life are cool.
My Serpentor's Air Chariot.
Yeah.
I think even the Serpentor.
It's gotten a little blurry over the years as I've upgraded my collection, but there are still figures that I'll pull out and be like, this is the one I had as a kid. My very first G.I. Joe was Airborne, and I still have that Airborne. He's not in great shape, but I'm like, you were the start of it all. My sacred.
The God figure. It was the God figure.
All right, well, I think that probably does it, and because we want to cram all this into our regular episode as well, so I don't want to go on too long. Is there anything that you wanted to talk about while you're? Is this the first time you've ever been on a non-Order of Battle show?
Does it count YouTube?
I count YouTube.
I've been on Fun School Ronnie's channel.
Who?
On YouTube, Fun School Ronnie.
Fun School Ronnie. I assume only does Fun School stuff. What did you guys talk about?
It was some sort of thing where we were doing a shark. Oh, it was Cobra Convergence.
Ah, okay.
We made a video of us shooting our shark missiles for the 92 eels. We actually have a pre-production one of those.
Yes, I've heard all about the insane collecting habits of a madman.
We have 80 sharks and we need more tails, but we can't find any sharks we can't find any tails that aren't part of a shark, and that's just getting us nowhere.
Sounds like you should just give it up.
No.
All right, thanks so much for taking time out of your day to come and talk to us. Next time we'll try to get Jaren here because you guys are so close to the same age. I know you get along real well.
He's like 30-something and I'm 10.
He's probably got to be at least 14, right?
He's like 30.
That's what he gets. He's not here to defend himself, so it makes him an easy target. All right, buddy. We're all done. So this is a question for everybody, but I'm surprised at all the stuff that Jaren has in his background that was unopened, and we were talking about that right as we were starting to record. And this is something that is another struggle for me as well, but do you guys find yourself with too much of the same stuff? Like if you open this closet behind me, there's probably 7 of those Hiss tanks that came out in the retro wave, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. I find myself sometimes collecting with no goal in mind, just that I have excessively need things that are created.
I'll chime in first because I got a lot to say. Yes. So
Comfy.
I will buy anything 1/18 scale. And if I find something that I like that is outside of the brand that I think is cool, I will buy as many as I can find. A good example is 5-6 years ago at Ollie's, they had one of the weird, like, I don't know how it works, but it was like half Chatmay, half the core, Leonard. Like, it was these weird, like, crossover, I don't know, whatever. But it came with a throwaway figure and this, like, semi-realistic drone and, like, big, like real-world drone with this cool little, like, launcher vehicle. And this is where my psychosis comes in. So I see it, and I'm like, and it was at Ollie's for like $5 or $10, and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna get that. That drone is cool. I'll use some acetone and get like the stupid paint off it. This has like, you know, Sentinel 1 or Hero Force or whatever, you know, whatever it was. And I open it up, and I'm like, man, this drone is awesome. This little vehicle is awesome. And then in the corner, there's this little rubber net, and this little rubber net completely outshined everything in the box. And I went back and I bought 5 or 6 of them over the next 2 weeks for these rubber nets. Now, take that and you add in army building, you add in the scarcity of modern G.I. Joe. So like when 50th anniversary was at Toys R Us, I would buy every single thing I could find. I think I had at one point like 60 to 70 of the Steel Brigade Iron Grenadier 2-packs. I mean, like,
Wait,
I have
sorry. How many?
60 to 70 of the 2-packs.
Wow. You said it, and it just went straight through my brain like it was normal. And then I had to stop and be like, that's not normal. Wait a minute.
That was a whiplash effect.
Wow.
So now, to be fair, I would go in and, you know, when I pre-ordered the full wave from Big Bad Toy Store because it was somehow like a minor joint release with Toys R Us. But then I would go in and I didn't have as much fun money as I have now back then. So I would go in and I would prioritize whatever they had. There was 2 Toys R Us's in my city, and I would bounce back and forth. And I would prioritize, you know, with the Gung Ho pack with the Shadow Crimson Guard. I was like, man, I don't need 20 Gung Ho's, but I would love a lot of these Crimson Guard figures. And it got to the point where they dropped the price, and then they were getting cases of just that pack. So I would go in, and they were marked down to $10, and they'd have 5 at a shot. So I would just say, I would look around, and I'd be like, well, there's no way I'm leaving these at $10 a pop.
There's no one here to judge me.
But to the point that I would go in, like, say it was like a Wednesday, and I was like seriously living paycheck to paycheck. So like Wednesday, middle of the week, my account was looking not good. I would go in on a Wednesday, there'd be 5, and I'd be like, I hope there's at least 1 when I come back on Friday. I'd come back Friday, there'd be 10. So I would burn up all of my fun money and a little bit more for the week. You know, and I would take as many as I could get. And then when they went down to the next phase of clearance, you know, it was like at that point I was like, screw it. If it's here and it's on clearance, it's coming home.
They'll take it all.
So yes, I am planning on moving semi soon, and I am gonna slowly start packing up my collection room. And when I move, I'm going through all of the stuff I have in my attic that is just bins and bins and bins and bins, jam-packed with carded figures. And I'm going to start clearing out a lot of stuff because I kind of hit the point where I would go to Joe Fest, like my first and second Joe Fest that I went to, I would go with a huge wad of cash, and I am so obsessed with hunting and finding deals that I would come home with bags of figures I already had because the deal was good. So it hit a point where I was like, okay, I have a lot of modern Cobra Troopers, like a lot. And I was like, I don't need to come back with another 15, regardless of the price, with the exception of the Black Dollar General Trooper. If I see that for a good deal, I will buy as many as I can ever find. I don't care. But I was very proud of myself the last 2 Joe Fests that I went to because I made it an actual point to stop myself. Like I had handfuls of troop builders that I have, 20 to 30 of already. And I was like, all right, no. I have to stop. Let's use that money on a more expensive figure that I don't have that I like because prices are just climbing.
There's nothing like a fiscally reckless collector to figure out that one thing of ramen noodle and one thing of Campbell's vegetable beef makes a full meal.
I have 100% lived that life. When I lived on my own in my house, that was like a regular occurrence where I would go and there'd be a new wave and I'd buy the whole new wave, and then that's that's it, buddy. You're gonna eat whatever you got. It's saltine dinner. You know what I mean? So, so I guess my question now is, how much is too much? Do you have a number now where you're like 10 of these guys, 20 of these guys, 30 of these guys?
For me, it just depends on the build of the figure. So actually, Classified's a perfect example. I'm hot and cold with 6-inch. When Classified first hit, I was trying to go as buck wild as I could possibly go. I think I have like somewhere between 5 and 10 Red Ninjas. I don't remember offhand. Then Cobra Island hit, and it was like hard and difficult and frustrating. And I managed to find 2 at retail of the Cobra Trooper. And then they announced, the repaint Trooper. And, Jason and I were going back and forth. Kind of the same fatigue where it's like we're both chasing other sizes of G.I. Joe that are more expensive, that we like better. I mean, not necessarily that we don't like, but just that's what we're used to and what we love the most is the 3 3/4 and the 4-inch scale. So I tried to set a cap of 5 for if I'm doing a troop builder. But, Target fixes their system, and then all of a sudden, I can order one through Hasbro Pulse, I can order one through Target, and then, Nicole can order one through Target, and then my friend can order one from Target, my coworker can order one from Target, and then all of a sudden now, in this blur of those like 2 or 3 weeks where they kept adding and unadding and adding and unadding, I ended up with like another 6 Cobra Troopers and as many Vipers as I could get. So, I don't know. I guess I sit here and try to tell you that I have gained some sort of self-control, but I haven't ordered any more of the standard Cobra Infantry figure. And I guess, I don't know. I guess because the Cobra Island stuff was so scarce when it was available, I said I better jump or I'm never going to get it again.
I feel for the same thing. You were like sitting like, oh man, finally Major Blood's available. I'll take him, but I have one to open and I have one to keep sealed. So I'm literally just like, what? That's not even a troop builder. It's just another regular guy. And so my collection is suddenly like, I have 3 Baronesses with motorcycle. That makes no sense at all. It's just taking up room. And room is like right now my most precious commodity is that I'm suddenly looking at all the stuff that's in my closet thinking, how much of this stuff do I really need? What's the justification for keeping it? When have I hit the point of too much? And I'm pretty good about cleaning out kind of regularly, but there's still always stuff that is just kind of like there that I just for some reason, can't justify getting rid of, or something mentally won't let me get rid of it.
I have one thing to throw in on what you had said about the price of figures and taking them off the card and that line. That line for me, or what I, at least so far, like I found a Pythona carded at like a local junk store, and I wound up getting her for about $13.
Oh, wow.
Because I did a huge bundle deal, and the guy was just like, the more you add, the price keeps going down. The price keeps going down. So I bought this figure, and when I bought her and got her for $14, she was already $100. And I don't necessarily have a crazy connection to Pythona. I think it's a really cool figure, and I think it's like probably one of the club's best free figures. Or not, but incentive figures.
Right.
But for me, I won't open her until I have a reason to. So if I eventually get around to trying to create something where I feel I need her, then I'll cut her off the card. But until then, she's in a star case in a bin in my attic.
That's kind of my mentality with troop building also, is that when 25th started, I was like buying bats, buying Crimson Guards, buying Vipers. And I thought someday I'll be making a diorama and I'll open them then. Well, it's been 10, 15 years since then. They're still sitting in my closet on a hook like, this great project's going to manifest someday where I'm going to need 5 more bats. I don't know. I want to come back to something you said in a minute, Joel. But before I do that, Jason, same concept. When you're doing troop building, is A kind of in charge of that? Do you guys scoop up a bunch of like Vipers or Heat Viper version 2s, or is he fine just how it is?
It varies. We have some of the more expensive troop builders, we might have 2 or 3. Some of the cheaper ones, we might have 5 or 6. It just sort of varies. And then if there's something that he's hyper into, then I'll chase it. He got really hyper into scrap iron, which is not a troop builder, but he decided he wanted to turn scrap iron into a troop builder. So he has his scrap iron, and then all the other scrap irons are his iron guard. And so we ended up with, 10, 12 scrap irons. I'm not even sure how many rocket launchers and missiles and etc. But there's, at least 10 complete scrap irons, and then et cetera number of accessory pack scrap iron things. And it was simply because he was like, hey, this would be a cool troop builder if I turned it into this other thing. Outside of that, it varies from figure to figure. The only troop builder that we've legitimately gone ham on is the 92 and Fun School Eels, and that's more me than him because of the shark.
Speaking of mental illness, everybody, check this guy out.
Yes, talk about that man. Don't mention badgers.
Yeah, Jaren, we'll not talk about Night Creeper V2.
Oh.
Everybody's got their something.
Right there.
Hey, Night
my boy.
Creeper V2's all right.
All right, so
That's my boy.
let me double back, Joel, to something that you said when you were talking about just a minute ago, that when you bought that Pythona, you didn't like feel a strong need to open it, and you didn't have like a strong attachment to that character. Do you find, as somebody that really is a modern and forward collector, that there are a lot of characters like that you don't really like know the history about, or do you require is there another form of media that influences figures that you want or buy now?
Really, it comes down to the toy for me. If I like the toy, or if I like the character, or if I like the idea of the character. I mean, you and I have talked about this privately, but the club has made a lot of weird characters that would have never made it in the standard line, and a lot of those, in my opinion, specifically what time frame they were released, they demand a very high premium. And, I open everything, or I would prefer to have everything loose so I can open it and fiddle with it. A lot of those figures for me, probably because I don't have the same nostalgic connection as a lot of other people, I can try to make my own out of Marauder or existing Hasbro stuff. I won't pay crazy dollars for a figure that I feel doesn't have the articulation to warrant the price tag. And a lot of that, I'm lucky in that sense because I don't have the nostalgic connection to a lot of these that someone like you has, where, because you've been with the brand for a long time and through various changes of Joe's. So, and I think it's cool that you hunt down those things. That's also a head scratcher to me in the same time. But I also, I guess, yes, the short answer for your question is I'm weird where I can skip and not skip certain things. I paid a good penny for Footloose, and I probably could have eventually just made my own, but for whatever reason, that was one that I wanted. Don't know why, but I had to have it.
Have you ever picked up a figure that, premium or not, that has made you, like the figure is so good, you become interested in the character, like maybe you weren't aware of them before?
Definitely, I started and then fell off with Guillotine.
Yeah.
I think the club's Guillotine is like one of their best, like Franken-Joes, period. Mm-hmm. I do wish he had different hands, but hey, you can't have everything. I mean, he just has ninja hands, so it doesn't, like, he can't really hold the stuff that he comes with. Actually, a lot of the club's, like, Action Force stuff kind of really did that for me. And, I mean, some of those figures aren't that great. Some of them are good, but I guess just because they are, like, when I say foreign, I mean literally foreign. I kind of like the element of being able to look at some of these characters and kind of read the file card and then kind of put my own spin on it until I eventually read through, 1 through 155 of the comics, and then can decide which characters I like more than other characters.
Yeah, I fall victim to this a lot. When the FSS and Consets come out and they'll basically make a brand new character that has no backstory at all. It might be in the little comic book that they include. Those are some of my favorite characters because they're like usually a pretty decent figure, usually like a baseline of a good idea, and then they're just like, you guys fill in the other details. Crimson Asp is a perfect example of a figure that I really like, and it has absolutely no like history. You've got a file card and you've got that little book that came with the set, and that's it. So I do like stuff like that a lot.
Coils O'Doom, to kind of bounce off of that figure, I built a whole squad for him.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like that. That figure has a very bad backstory.
Yeah, it does. A bad code name and a bad backstory, but a cool figure.
That's always the best of the modern stuff. Part of where I get lost with modern is I don't need 17 remakes of what I already have in the vintage line.
Yeah, they definitely. Even my modern collection, which is, I mean, at this point, pretty expansive. There's still some holes in it where you're literally like, this is almost exactly the same figure that just came out in the last. So I would skip some stuff, and I don't feel bad about it at all because I still have a boatload of modern figures that resemble other modern figures in the collection. Jaren, I forgot your question. What's the question that you were...
I gave you one question.
Yeah, well, I showed up on time,
and
so...
You did.
So,
I'm sorry that I waited over an hour for a ride that lasted 2 seconds.
Do you want to save it for the Patreon feed? Do you want to ask them your question?
Yeah, we'll save it for Patreon. No. So this is going to be a little difficult, and if you don't have an answer, that's fine. But if you were kidnapped and you had to and you got to choose the Joes that went and saved you, who would it be? Maybe a 4-man squad, or if you had one dude that you're like, nah, he's got it.
Who kidnapped us? This is your pop psych question. Who kidnapped us?
Oh, I mean, if it's who kidnapped you, it's a cartel. The cartel has you.
Oh, so it's not Cobra. It's just a cartel.
Yeah. That way they can come in guns blazing if they want to, and we don't have
Well, I
to
mean,
worry
if
about
it's a
killing any
cartel, then
characters.
you're talking about DEF because they're built for cartels. But you got something, Joel?
All right. It's going to be Tunnel Rat, Outback, Stalker. We'll go Snake Eyes.
All right, cartel.
The cartel's got
It's a
it.
Hitman.
Evidently, that was what I didn't expect. Chuckles, Shockwave, Scarlet, and honestly, that would probably do it. But you always have to have a ninja, so we can throw in Snake Eyes just because you always have to have a ninja.
He's literally on every mission everywhere. He's
I
saving
mean-
you both in 2 separate parts at the same exact time.
You don't need him. Like you could do Storm Shadow or Jinx but yeah, Chuckles. If it's a cartel, Chuckles, Shockwave, Scarlet would be the startup. And then you could always throw in a heavy weapons person. You know, I'm going to take Roadblock Anywhere or the ninja or, literally anyone at that point.
I love that both of you guys were just like, I've got 3 and Snake Eyes. I mean, I feel like that's how, as an outsider, I feel like that's how a lot of the stories are. They're like, well, we're going to have the team doing this and then Snake Eyes.
Hey, you got to sell the book somehow, man.
Well, I mean, and you said cartel. That's what threw me off. Not the being kidnapped, not the 4-man team.
Yeah. You're prepared for that. You were ready for all of
Cartel.
that.
I'm like, all right, so are we in Rio Lindo or are we...
This is my favorite thing with Jason is when you ask him any sort of G.I. Joe centric question, because he is like the paper file guy that he is, like everybody else just kind of goes for like, I'm like, okay, well, I just like Outback, Stalker's badass, But Jason's like, all right, hold on a second, let me hit pause here mentally. He's like, okay, they're cartel. I'm gonna need my inside guy. That's Chuckles, clearly. All right. So I need Shockwave because he's obviously the guy that's gonna bust through the door. Scarlet can do it all, so we'll throw her in for good measure. And and it's just like, there's been so many times I've just tried to ask him just a stupid question, and it's like I'm always amazed by his response because it's so Joe scientific to the point of like. It's beautiful. It's so much fun, and it's also great because if I'm like trying to build a figure or something, I'll just casually ask him something, and then generally I can gear the figure out based on his response.
That's awesome.
I like rewriting the file cards. I like reimagining the figures. My art isn't good enough to show you pictures, but I like doodling new costumes. We have Snake Eyes from all the way from 82 and 85. I don't need 7 versions of him again. Like I like the 2 versions of Classified, but I don't need that again. I have that already. I've had that for 40 years. I like the new weird stuff. So yes, this is something that I do quite often just on my own.
I think we all have a running sort of amalgamation of file card, cartoon, comic book, whatever else. So I think it's part of the fun is that reimagining.
Yeah, for me, like the cartoon is candy. But if you want my what is G.I. Joe, I looked at the comic books and the file cards. The cartoon really does not influence outside of, I think Bazooka and Alpine are a beautiful couple. But that's strictly cartoon. Outside of that, I really don't use the cartoon as any sort of basis on what G.I. Joe is.
I like to lean into the cartoon when I am writing something that's a little bit more far-fetched because I don't want to let go of that universe. But it's because things like Cobra Law which is a very controversial concept in the G.I. Joe universe, is still like suddenly there's nothing you can write that's not fair. If you want vampires, I mean, who am I to argue? There's a guy with a snake tail. You know what I mean? Like it really opened up the door of what you could kind of throw in the universe and it would stick.
Before Cobra Law, I mean, there was still like Destro has Cthulhu in his basement. I mean,
sure.
I mean,
when I was like again, a little later in life kid buying these Spy Troops and Valor versus Venom, I would read the file cards, I would watch the discs, but then really, like, I mean, I knew obviously Snake Eyes, Duke. I knew who the core people were. I mean, I had seen a handful of Sunbow episodes as well, but I mean, like, I kind of just, like, that Dusty figure for me was like one of my main dudes just based on the gear. But like, I mean, Snake Eyes was always Snake Eyes, and he was always like, you know, the silent assassin ninja, and I loved him just as much as this specific Dusty figure. But I just harp on this figure because his gear made him like the main dude in my playtime. It had nothing to do with the file card. I read it. And like, I understood that he was a desert specialist, but he came with well, I guess he technically didn't come with the ghillie suit, but I put the ghillie suit with him, and he was jungle, he was desert, he was everything. I mean, and now when I'm doing stuff now, I just kind of get more hyper excited about gearing figures out and then making my own little sub teams with existing characters. I mean, I listened to the Full Force read cover one of, the Battle Action Force comics, and they talk about Snake Eyes in a jungle setting, and I knew listening to it that it's Snake Eyes in black, but I came home and built a Snake Eyes in jungle green and kitted him out specifically for the jungle. And that is kind of one of my favorite things about being a modern collector, is a lot of the times they really did give us, the core team or fringe characters in specific outfit and gears that, that you wouldn't necessarily get anywhere else.
Guys, thanks so much for joining us today. If our listeners were listening to this episode and they wanted to, I don't know, hear about another hour worth of this content, where do you think they could go to find that?
Full Force.
No, they won't let me on over there.
We're at the Order of Battle podcast.
That's right, Order of Battle podcast, which is where we're also going to be in the second part of this exciting Crisis on Infinite podcast crossover. Guys, where can they find you on social media?
I'm on Twitter at Order of Battle PD, and then Joel is on Instagram at Order of Battle Pod. We have Order of Battle pod.com, which just leads us to the Audio Boom link for our website, and we're at orderofbattlepod@gmail.com.
Great. So if you guys haven't listened to Order of Battle at this point, we literally probably drop the name almost every single episode. There's literally nothing. You literally have no reason to not have listened to it by now. But if by some reason that you haven't, you now have the best reason of all, because I will be on it in the next episode.
So long as your PayPal goes through. What?
Well, it's pending.
Hey, this is the crossover event no one asked for and nobody wanted but us.
It's an infinite crossover involving exactly 2 shows. It goes on forever. You can find us online at Anything Joe's Pod. That's Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. You can email us directly at anythingjoespodcast@gmail.com. And we want to thank you so much for joining us for this episode. It's been a lot of fun, and I think that these casual conversations are probably some of the best types of conversations in the G.I. Joe universe, like just people just kind of exploring the many different avenues of the G.I. Joe hobby. And that's going to do it for us today. Thanks so much for listening, and we look forward to hearing from you in just 2 short weeks, where anything's available for discussion here on Anything Joe's.
Who's gonna be editing this? Dad finally got a break.